seeds drifting through space for years took root in a farmer's field. From the seeds came pods, which have the power to reproduce themselves in the exact likeness of any form of life.
So that's how it began.
Guys, welcome to a classic film review of 1956's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, starring Kevin McCarthy and Dana Wynter, and directed by the legendary Don Siegel. Now, it's the classic sci-fi tale of a small-town doctor who stumbles upon the fact that the population of his community is being replaced by emotionless extraterrestrial duplicates. Now, it was based on Jack Finney's 1955 novel, The Body Snatchers, and this movie arrived to throw a science fiction spin on the McCarthy witch hunt sweeping America, a campaign spreading the fear of alleged communist and Soviet influence on American institutions. Now, these are heavy themes to squeeze into a 1 hour and 20-minute B-movie, but squeeze it does, and the results are one of cinema's seminal sci-fi movies. Let's take a look. So the first thing you have to remember about 1956's Invasion of the Body Snatchers is that it is and always was manufactured to be a B-movie. Walter Wagner Productions insisting on a shooting schedule of just 20 days and a budget of just below $400,000. And as was his style, Don Siegel, the director, kept things simple with minimal visual effects and no elaborate stunt work, etc. Just stark black and white photography and that sense of unnerving paranoia.
Listen, Doctor. Now, you must listen to me. You must understand me. I'm a doctor, too. I am not insane. I am not insane.
Now, suppose we just sit down over here, Dr. Bennell, and you tell me what happened.
So the movie takes no time in getting started and is told in a flashback structure by, and at his wit's end, Dr. Miles J. Bennell, played by Kevin McCarthy.
At first glance, everything looked the same. It wasn't. Something evil had taken possession of the town.
And boom, we're into the plot as the doctor is returning to his small hometown from a medical convention in San Francisco and is greeted by some of the strange things going on. Children failing to recognise their parents, patients making appointments yet never appearing, and his ex-girlfriend Becky Driscoll, played by the lovely Dana Wynter, is convinced that the man claiming to be her uncle is in fact an imposter.
Miles, he is Ira.
Of course he is. What do you mean?
It's just that Wilma's so positive. Will she be all right?
Oh, I think so. I'm a doctor according to my diploma, but I don't really know what Wilma's trouble is.
Now, of course, Miles temporarily reassures everyone there's a rational explanation for this epidemic of mass hysteria, but he gets a phone call from a friend to come over and take a look at a strange corpse with an unfinished, half-formed face and no fingerprints.
She thinks that her uncle and her aunt aren't her uncle and her aunt. There's several cases of such delusion. Now, this isn't you yet, but there is a structural likeness.
Now, I do have to say here that this film was remade in 1978 and 1993 and has also inspired countless homages and rip-offs, so it's no spoiler to say that we eventually discover that the town is being taken over by pods from outer space who've made their way to Earth and begin a rapid colonisation. The fact that they do this by copying a person exactly, although apparently without emotions like fear and desire, etc., is the genius of the plot. You see, how do you tell who's a person and who's a pod? So, unlike much of the 1950s science fiction output, the villain here is not a monster, a creature, or a giant insect, but here an obscure biological weapon. Now, these giant seed pods that somehow copy you and then dispose of your old body. Actually, I'm not 100% sure how that works, come to think of it. The most revealing moments, though, arrive in the film's famous greenhouse scene where two of the aforementioned seed pods burst open with a milky fluid spewing out to reveal work-in-progress copies of our protagonists.
Jack! Jack!
They're like huge seed pods.
Now, admittedly, much of this movie may seem quaint now, almost 70 years after the fact, but there are moments and scenes that are genuinely sinister. That greenhouse pod scene for a start, but also moments such as Miles finding this secret meeting taking place in the centre of suburbia and realising his trusted allies are becoming fewer and fewer.
Baby asleep yet, Sally?
Not yet, but she will be soon. And there'll be no more tears.
Shall I put this in her room?
Yes, in her playpen. No, wait. Maybe I'd better take it.
And of course its ending, or its original ending before studio interference insisted that it was too bleak and that the relatively weak framing device had to be inserted. Which is a shame, but doesn't surprise me, as this must have struck some nerves across the United States that was becoming itself paranoid and shamefully ready to throw each other under the bus of supposed communism. Probably the scariest parts of Invasion of the Body Snatchers come in the quieter moments, like when some of the people who've been replaced explain to Miles and Becky in chillingly reasonable tones how easy it is to allow yourself to surrender and to conform. No more uncertainty, no more pain, and no more questions. Just yield to the erasure of your individuality.
Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds, your memories, and you're reborn into an untroubled world.
Where everyone's the same.
Exactly.
What a world.
So when the hero of your movie, the guy who would usually save the day and rescue humanity, ends up a raving madman, things don't look too peachy. Here, Kevin McCarthy, no relation, I don't think, to the infamous Senator McCarthy, is a serviceable lead, although off the top of my head I couldn't tell you one other thing that he's been in. Now, he plays a regular dude here, reduced to wild-eyed and wide-eyed wreck. His co-star, Dana Wynter, I know was in 1970s Airport, and again does what she needs to, and isn't just a pretty face to drag across the plot. So the script here was written by Daniel Mannering and, like I mentioned, based upon a 3-part serial story written by Jack Finney for Collier's magazine in 1954 that was then made into a full-length novel in 55 and ultimately directed by Don Siegel, who was well-versed in delivering small-budget movies promptly, including up to that point The Duel at Silver Creek with Audie Murphy and the underrated Riot in Cell Block 11 and Private Hell, both in 1954. Siegel, of course, would go on to make half a dozen Clint Eastwood movies, the most famous of which, without a doubt, was 1971's Dirty Harry. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the film was remade by Philip Kaufman in 1978 with an all-star cast, Donald Sutherland, Leonard Nimoy, Jeff Goldblum, and that swaps the communist paranoia for classic 70s political paranoia. And there was a mid-90s army-based set version made by Abel Ferreira, simply named Body Snatchers, which I've not seen maybe since the mid-90s. They're all worth checking out in fairness, but I'll always make the case for Don Siegel's original being the superlative version. He takes heavy and very of the times themes of mass paranoia and undertones of communist infiltration, and instead of making a stern and serious political message movie, fortunately chooses to tighten the screws of tension with every successive scene, and takes a tiny budget and less than 3 weeks to make one of the most exciting sci-fi thrillers of its era and of cinema history. Go check it out.